Hi there everyone, Lars here from Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast by novice writers for novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And with Goblin Slayer being all the controversial rage out there on the internet, I thought I'd weigh in with my own 3 cents on the matter, and give you 3 lessons that I've taken away from watching the show so far. Lesson number 1, keep your story consistent with its opening. Lesson number 2, names for characters have power. And lesson 3, Goblin Slayer is actually a great example of how to adapt Dungeons & Dragons for a written story. The first order of business is keeping your story consistent with its opening. It is crucial that any story have an engaging beginning, whether that be an action-packed one, a philosophically intriguing one, maybe a foreboding one, warm and welcoming, or anything else for that matter. It has to hook your intended audience. That is so very important. But once you have set the tone of your story within the first chapter or the prologue, you have to follow through with it throughout the rest of your story. Yes, your plot and characters will and should evolve from their initial starting point, but your readers should not feel like they've been tricked into reading something that they didn't sign up for. As things change, the story must make sense of those changes. Don't make your story start off as some sort of psychological thriller and then suddenly switch to a melodrama. That's just not going to work no matter how hard you try. Goblin Slayer opens with a brutal first episode showing scenes of gratuitous violence, including rape. And from there, the show mostly maintains its dark and edgy vibe. Everything within the story and its narration is meant to impress how dangerous this world really is, especially when dealing with something like goblins. The first episode is a crazy hook that is only matched by episode 7. And honestly, the gap in between those episodes is perfectly okay. Take, for example, one of my favorite novels, The Way of Kings, which opens with a heart-pumping assassination scene as Seth, the first magic user to be seen in millennia, attacks the King of Alethkar, and in a spectacular display kills him, including a lot of other people in the process. But then it's not for hundreds of pages later that we see anything comparable to this amazing opening. But it's still okay, because the opening sets the tone for the danger, the magic, and the politics that are all hallmarks of The Way of Kings. The novel stays consistent with its opening, even if nothing matches its over-the-top coolness for a long while. And you end up cherishing that scene even so much more when you get to see Seth back in action, because you're like, holy cow, I've been waiting for you for the past couple hundred pages. Forward Unto Death, Goblin Slayer's 7th episode runs in a similar vein. After 5 episodes that are way more lax on the violence and darkness, heck, we even get an episode about the daily life of Goblin Slayer and his compatriots, the gang is plunged into a nearly unbeatable scenario. Trapped in a chamber with poisonous gas, a horde of goblins, and a goblin champion about the size of a cave troll, Goblin Slayer has a lot on his plate. We see a high elf nearly raped, lizard shaman overwhelmed, priestess gets a chunk of her arm ripped off with jagged teeth, and Goblin Slayer himself suffers severe physical trauma, all in this episode. And this is all rounded off with Goblin Slayer finally tapping into both rage and bloodied and becoming downright vicious, smashing a goblin's face in with his shield to the point that he fully decapitates the goblin, or more bisecting him, I guess is the case. And the second half of this episode is just wonderfully gritty, dark, and it prominently displays all of these earlier underlying tones that anyone can die in this unforgiving world. The payoff for Forward Unto Death is extremely satisfying. All of the themes, ideas, and the atmosphere introduced in the first episode re-emerge in Forward Unto Death in all of their gritty, edgy glory. And if you know from my first episode on this channel, I talked about angst and edge, and this is one of those weird cases where angst and edge actually blend together quite nicely. Modern angst and the original angst. And as I said, it's just really satisfying because of the continuity within the series. So that's the first lesson that you really want to take to heart, is having a continuity of atmosphere and themes and ideas from what you initially introduce within your stories. The second lesson I stated is that names for your characters have power to them. Goblin Slayer attempts something very ambitious in that all of the characters are called according to their jobs. We've got Priestess, High Elf, Goblin Slayer, etc. This further reinforces the dangerous nature of this world. Why bother learning the names of the people that you befriend because they could literally die later that day? It also gives a glimpse into Goblin Slayer's mindset as an individual. The audience is therefore encouraged to pay closer attention to pick up the tidbits of character development that happen. Seriously, going without names changes the whole experience. But it also distances us from these characters. Without real names given to them, it becomes so much harder to identify with them. It feels like something precious and intimate is missing. And because that is missing, we can only get so invested. As a writer, it is sometimes good to not immediately name a character, as that provides an air of mystique or danger to them. It also gets readers questioning who they really are dealing with here on the page. But giving your characters a name makes them people with whom readers can feel as though they have a special bond. Names really do have power in forging bonds between fictional characters and real people. If those bonds are not there, your readers will ultimately not care about your characters. It then takes a masterful turn of storytelling to make it work. Finally, my third lesson to take away from Goblin Slayer is this. It is possible to make a Dungeons & Dragons campaign into a proper story for others to enjoy. There's this stigma that it's almost impossible to turn a good D&D campaign into a proper story. However, when you watch Goblin Slayer, you realize that this is a story, a D&D campaign story properly lifted from the notes of the Dungeon Master and the dice rolls of the players onto the pages of the written word. And how is that done? Well, you see, Goblin Slayer gives real autonomy to the cast of characters. From the first episode, Priestess is presented with multiple options, and we see the routes that she takes. Goblin Slayer as well comes up with really creative ways to kill the pesky imps called goblins, in ways that any big D&D player would immediately realize are the products of half-baked crazy ideas that totally blindside the DM and are only pulled off with some really lucky dice rolls. But nothing comes through better as when Goblin Slayer uses his magic scroll to kill an ogre with water pressure. Such a bizarre and inventive move that this could only be something that a D&D fanatic would cook up. Being a dungeon master myself once upon a time, and I've watched some of my best monsters wiped out in ridiculous ways, I can totally appreciate these creative kills and campaign decisions that are sprinkled all throughout Goblin Slayer. It makes me feel like I'm actually watching a D&D campaign unfold before my eyes and not just simply another fantasy story. And that just, to me, is so cool. One of the hardest things to do as a writer trying to capture a D&D story is to reproduce that inventiveness and spontaneity that role players have. You have to really think how people would think outside of the box and how they might even overthink a basic decision or just charge headlong into a situation. It takes work and time to get this inventiveness right and to make it feel genuine on the page. I worked once on a novella, which you can go check out in the link in the description box below, which is my attempt to translate the experience of gaming and the silliness of gaming with friends and the disjointed way that a Dungeon Master story gets told to the players and all of that into a cohesive story. I thought I was doing a pretty good job as a novice writer. I mean, it's not the best story I've ever written, but I thought I was doing pretty good. And then I watched Goblin Slayer, and I was like, oh boy! This is what I wanted to create! Just, well, minus the whole edgy opening bit. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. I mean, I've already praised the 1st and 7th episodes earlier in this video, but I will admit, I probably could have done without some of the scenes in the first episode. In any case, one last thing on the subject of Goblin Slayer in D&D is this. I can't be the only one who wants to see a face-off between Goblin Slayer and Not the Brave. Right? Right? Okay, for those of you who are uninitiated, Not is a character from Critical Role Season 2, and she happens to be a goblin. Goblin Slayer once said you could look really, really hard and maybe find one good goblin out there in the world, and this precious cinnamon roll of a thief is just that. Or, well, okay, to be more technical, she's at least the best goblin we could hope to meet so far in any kind of story, and though I said thief, she is more accurately put a rogue and arcane trickster. And she roams about with her closest friend, Caleb, a human wizard, with poor people skills and even poorer hygiene. And they are both members of the motley group, the Mighty Nine! I had to do some research to try and set up a potential battle between Goblin Slayer and Not, just, well, because, as I said, I really want this face-off. Well, you see, Goblin Slayer himself has no set quote-unquote level, per se, but we do know that he is a silver-ranked adventurer. The ranks in the series are numbered in 10, with silver being the third highest rank. With the normal D&D level cap being 20, that would put Goblin Slayer, logically, at level 15 or 16. However, the magical ogre that he fights in episode 4 gave him quite the challenge, and that brute was definitely nowhere near the highest level in the game. We know from episode 5 that silver-ranked adventurers also gain their status from being reliable and capable, not necessarily from being overpowered. Given Goblin Slayer's strength, then, and his ingenuity and his capabilities, I would more readily place him at level 10, though he could be a level or two higher depending on how you want to argue things. I mean, he has already by now taken down a Beholder and some high-level bosses, so I mean, placing him at level 12 is also within the realm of reason, but to be safe, I'm going to place him at level 10. Not, on the other hand, is level 7, with decent armor and health, and she is wickedly intelligent. Just like Goblin Slayer, she is super resourceful, and perhaps even more so. She has a very good habit of hiding herself and has made many of her best kills doing sneak attacks. She also has access to magic that Goblin Slayer certainly does not have, and she uses heavy crossbows and gunpowder to devastating effect. I will gladly concede, though, that in a head-to-head fight, unless Goblin Slayer fails every single saving throw after succumbing to hideous laughter, which I would love to see this stoic guy laugh, Not probably wouldn't make it out on her own. I easily hand the matchup to Goblin Slayer. But there's one thing, though. Just as Goblin Slayer is dutifully accompanied by Priestess wherever he goes, wherever Not is, Caleb is not far behind. And Priestess herself does not have enough magic in her arsenal to stop Caleb the Wizard. That's just the way of it. And if things got real, it would be Goblin Slayer's party versus the Mighty Nine. 5 against 7. Yes, there are only 7 members of the Mighty Nine. It's a Zemian thing. It would be a much closer battle in this case, and Goblin Slayer would be confused by the much larger Goblin Ford, who is in fact a Warlock Orc. And chances are that Goblin Slayer would get the living snot Eldritch blasted out of him by Ford. Spell reserves and equipment taken into account, along with their long battle histories, I would probably give this fight over to the Mighty Nine. They have a much larger party. They've already taken down way bigger and scarier things than goblins, such as spirits, a hydra, a manticore, and loads of undead. Not to mention a raiding party of goblins and trolls. But who knows? That is the fun and adventure of playing D&D. You never know whom the dice will favor. It would be nevertheless a magnificent battle. If you all want to see a possible D&D battle played out here on the channel between Goblin Slayer's band and the Mighty Nine, then say so down in the comment section. I guarantee it would be fantastic to do. So, to reiterate, the 3 lessons to take away from Goblin Slayer are these. Number 1, keep your story's tone and themes consistent with its opening. Don't give in to presenting your audience with some simple, edgy clickbait just because that will draw attention. No, you never want to fool your audience into reading something that they didn't sign up for. They will not take kindly to that. Secondly, know how to use names in your story. The presentation and use of names, or the lack thereof, has major effects on how readers perceive and relate to your cast. Lastly, pay attention to how Goblin Slayer gives autonomy to its characters. This is key to creating an engaging cast and also capturing the spirit of a D&D game, if you're trying to translate your tabletop antics to the written page. But in overall, having characters who are able to make creative and individual decisions, and not just because the plot mandates such actions, really makes for very cool, engaging, and creative individuals. And these are the kind of people that that readers gravitate to, that they want to get more of because they're so individualistic. Well, that does it for this video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please like and subscribe. And also check out our podcast first season, if you haven't already, on Podbean, iTunes, and Google Play. We also have some neat stuff for you to check out on Tumblr, Reddit, and Pinterest. And don't forget, if you want me to do a battle simulation between Goblin Slayer's party and the Mighty Nine, then please leave a comment down below. Links for all of our sites are in the description box. And finally, we would love your recommendations for terrible fanfics to do epic readings of. Please send us your recommendations via our Twitter at Camille's Harem. We would absolutely love to go over them. We love causing intense pain to ourselves by reading terrible stories, and it makes for a great laugh. And yeah, that's all of it. So until the next video, tschüss.